everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Music Podcast, where I have with me today Mr. Aaron Clift. Aaron is a singer, songwriter, keyboardist, producer, all kinds of stuff. We're going to find out more with the Aaron Clift Experiment. The Aaron Clift Experiment is an Austin, Texas-based progressive rock outfit that has been making music since its formation and their debut album, Lonely Hills, in 2012. January 6th saw the release of the band's fourth studio album called The Age of Misinformation, and Aaron's here to tell us all about it. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here.
Fantastic to have you, man. We were just talking, and it's been, probably 10 years that, I've been following your music and connected with you in MySpace, I believe it was. And
Oh my God.
yeah,
Way back in the day.
yeah, it's pretty great to see you progress, pun intended, through your music career. And the progressive music that you guys make is really, really something special. There's not, there is a lot of music out there and you have to dig for it. This progressive music doesn't come and get you, you have to go find it. And you're one of those bands that is on the cream of the cream rises to the top. You guys are right on the top there for me. Um, like most progressive music, your music comes from a place of great intellect and extreme instrumental proficiency. What is your upbringing? What is I know your dad played piano and French horn and sang. You've studied classical composition. You have family that is involved in music. What was your upbringing like, and how do you get to this point in your life and with music?
Yeah, well, you mentioned it yourself that it's been a part of my family for ever since I can remember. When I was actually, my mom likes to remind everybody of this story that one of my first words was side, and that was my word for music because they used to play lots of LPs for me and they'd flip the music to the other side. And so I got excited when when the music was over, I was sad, and then I got excited when they flipped it over. So that became I think that stuck with me. And so they used to play stuff from their LP collection. Of course, I got a lot of children's music, but then there was a fair amount of Beatles. I grew up with that. My mom was really into Bob Dylan, so I got to hear that. My dad had a pretty extensive LP collection, and my introduction to progressive rock kind of came more when I was a teenager. But the first style of music that I really got into was grunge. That was really popular when I was a teen. That was the first style I discovered on my own. But grunge and a lot of those bands became my backdoor entrance into progressive rock. I still listen to a lot of those bands, and I still rank Soundgarden Super Unknown as my favorite album of all time. I didn't realize that there were a lot of oblique references to progressive rock within that music. But I remember playing that music for my dad because I was really excited about it and I wanted him to hear it too. I played him Soundgarden and he said that it reminded him a little bit of Black Sabbath. So he pulls out Master of Reality from his LP collection, puts it on the turntable, and I hear Sweet Leaf and I'm like, whoa, this is heavy. This reminds me of Bad Motorfinger, or should I say the other way around? The Bad Motorfinger reminds me of Black Sabbath.
Right.
So and then I play him like a track from Alice in Chains' Jar of Flies, and he said that it reminded him of like a darker sounding version of Crosby, Stills and Nash. So we go and listen to Sweet Judy Blue Eyes and Marrakesh Express and all that stuff. And I'm like, I'm really digging that. And then at some point, I think we listened to Led Zeppelin after I played him Stone Temple Pilots, and then I remember hearing Jethro Tull, and I thought it was pretty cool. It was Aqualung, and then there was this album I saw in his collection, and all I saw was the cover, and I was like, "What is this?" It was Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Tarkus album with the armadillo tank on the front, and I'm like, "This is really weird and out there." And I listened to the music and I thought, well, this is like weird rock music. I didn't know it was called progressive rock at the time. I just knew it was weird music. So I didn't think any of it. And then this was when I was in middle school. So I get to high school. As you mentioned, I started out as a classical musician. I started with viola as my first instrument when I was 11. And so I was really into classical music and I was really into grunge. And that was about the extent of, and, the classic stuff my parents played. That was kind of the extent of my knowledge. And then one of my friends who was really obsessed with Pink Floyd found out that he knew that I was into classical music and rock music. He's like, "You got to listen to this. It's right up your alley." And I listened to Dark Side of the Moon, and I'm like, "This is awesome. I want to find more music like it."
Mhm.
So I ask around my friends in high school, and nobody knows anything about it because they're all listening to whatever was current at the time. And progressive rock wasn't really big in the mid '90s, but then I find out. So I'm like, I don't know where to go for this. I took the unprecedented step of using my crappy dial up internet connection. And I think I must have done like some AOL search for music, and one of the first websites that comes up is All Music Guide, and and they promise to be the source for every all the albums out there. I'm like, okay. So I look up Pink Floyd, I look up Dark Side of the Moon, and it mentions the style of music called progressive rock, and I'm like, what is that?
Mhm.
Never heard of it before. And they say it combines classical music and rock, and I'm like, thinking to myself, is this like that Fifth of Beethoven song that's on the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, where they
Right.
just do a disco version of a classical tune? And no, it is more than that. I'm looking up like who some of the bands are that they recommend, and I see a couple names that I recognize. I recognize Genesis, but I'm like, the the I Can't Dance guys did this. But I love that song. I still like that song a lot.
Uh-huh.
But I was like, I
Sure.
just thought they were a pop group. And then I find out Peter Gabriel used to be their singer, and I'm like, the Sledgehammer guy sang for Genesis. I just thought, though, I knew who Phil Collins was, like, since I was a kid. I think my parents may even probably even played like Phil Collins stuff for me when I was a baby. But um, so I go out, I make a list of all the albums they're recommending. I go out, I go and find the CD store, and I find used copies of "Selling England by the Pound" by Genesis,
Yes.
"Every Good Boy Deserves Favor" by the Moody Blues, and I knew who the Moody Blues were from my dad's collection because he had Days of Future Past. We used to listen to that album, and Nights in White Satin always stuck with me. So I'm like, okay, I'll check out these guys. And then I also got Dream Theater Images and Words. So I had the perfect introduction to like the classic prog stuff and the more modern stuff, and that was my intro to progressive rock. And I think with Dream Theater, I saw the mixture of like kind of the heavy stuff that I liked from the grunge, and
Right.
then with the older stuff, the sort of the psychedelic side that I really enjoyed, and I started drawing parallels between all these, and then I get more into King Crimson later, and then King Crimson becomes my doorway into jazz music because I'm looking up who are they influenced by: Miles Davis, John Coltrane. Okay, I'll go check them out. Then I start getting into jazz music, and pretty soon I'm hopping into all these different styles of music, all because of one album that I really liked. And I think that's what I like about progressive rock. It's diverse. You can't really pin down the sound because every time you think you know what the sound is, some band comes along and does something new, and you're like, that's in the spirit of things, but it's totally different. And I like that unpredictability, but I also like the fact that there's so much freedom to do different things within it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's I mean, that's the definition of progressive rock, I think, is it's moving, it's taking it to another place. It's progressing through all forms and all the the really detailed pieces of composition and
Yeah.
structure in music. And
Yeah, and you mentioned before like intellectual stuff. Like I will be the first to admit I'm a total nerd. So like
Mhm.
I was reading The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings when I was a kid, and before the movies came out and it was cool again. I was that dorky kid playing like D&D and reading this stuff, and uh, I won't say that the fantasy subject matter of Prague necessarily was what appealed to me. I just liked that it was imaginative, like a lot of those books that was really into. I liked that part about it.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, that's a great journey, that the journey you just described of yours, because it starts in a place that is not progressive music necessarily. With the Beatles and Soundgarden and things like that. That's a far cry from something like, selling England by the pound. Uh, it's 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 a great journey to know those roots and to get to a place where you're at. Really great. Now, Soundgarden's Super Unknown. You say your favorite album still. It's the first record you bought, right?
It's the first album I bought, and it's the first band I ever saw in concert. I was
Nice.
definitely I was definitely too young to be going to that concert. 16 year no, I wasn't even 16. I was 15. I had a friend I went with who was 16. He had just gotten his driver's license and we went to this concert by ourselves and it was an all ages show, but we were surrounded by these like big burly dudes who are starting a mosh pit and crowd surfing and I'm getting caught in the middle of this and that was my trial by fire. But that was really special for me to discover the band on my own and have it kind of be my discovery and let it be the thing that brought me into so many other styles of music.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I have two older brothers, 7, 9 years older. They took their little brother to shows when they were teenagers. So I got to see, and I'm 54. So I got to see some classic shows, Pink Floyd's Animals tour, the Works tour from ELP. I remember watching Keith Emerson with the piano and destroy, just the Hammond and
Was
destroy.
he doing the flying piano then?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man, I
Yep.
wish I could have seen that. I watched that DVD with the California Jam concert. What an incredible lineup that show. But that's that
Unforgettable.
yeah, that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
so cool you got to see that.
Yeah, yeah. And I was, it took me when I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. In that period of my life, I was exposed to that, saw the classic Kiss shows and, Kansas back in the day. So that had a big impact on me as a child at that time. So I have much that same journey, just with some different bands. Uh, but I went and that was it. I had to, dive deep into music. I wanted to hear every kind of sound that was ever made. I didn't want to miss anything. So that, yeah, that brought me to this, where I have literally every music you could possibly think of, probably. And that makes me at peace. It is very comforting for me. So yeah, totally get where you're coming from for sure. Uh, you love Super Unknown. That's at the heart of all of this. Did you ever think of doing music like that? None of your music is really that muddy or dark. It doesn't have that vibe of a Soundgarden. Did you ever think of going in that direction?
I have at various points. Every time they're one of those bands that's really hard to like. They're hard to imitate well, and I don't try to imitate
Right.
necessarily the sound of another band. It's more like I want to think like how do they think.
Mhm.
Um, I compare it to like cooking because I love cooking too, but it's like if you gave me a bottle of barbecue sauce and I dumped it on my chicken, that doesn't necessarily make it barbecue. It's just chicken with barbecue sauce on it.
Right.
There's a technique to that. There's a mentality of like, how to cook it a certain way, and the cut of the meat, all that stuff. So thinking about music that way, I prefer to. I won't say that I've never like written anything that isn't reminiscent of something else. I think music isn't written in a vacuum. Anybody's going to sound like kind of the sum total of their influences, or move beyond that. But um, for me, what what it was about Soundgarden was the voice, more than anything. And I'm biased because I'm a singer, but
Mm.
for me, the first thing I heard was Chris Cornell's voice, and that was the voice that made me say, "Yes, I want to be a singer." And then later on, I guess I tend to gravitate towards a lot of vocalists like that because I really like Ian Gillan from Deep Purple, Roger Daltrey, um,
Mm.
Ronnie James Dio, like these guys with these really big, powerful voices. And
Right.
I I didn't initially like think I would ever be able to sing like that because I felt like I had a more delicate voice. But I think over years, taking voice lessons, just learning more about my instrument and kind of what works for me, I felt like I could still find a way to bring that kind of emotional resonance and intensity of those singers without sounding exactly like them. I could still sound like Aaron Clift, but like in my own way.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what it's really all about, I think. And I hear that in the music. I really don't, I hear different elements of things that I've heard, but I don't hear direct, structure of, Genesis or, Yes, or, it's Aaron Clift music, and that's the beauty of it, really. It's new and exciting in the genre with those influences. That's what makes it great, for sure. Um, you had Lonely Hills as a debut, Inner Light, Outer Darkness in 15. 18 saw If All Goes Wrong. You have this now. Um, Age of Misinformation now, fourth record. How is this record different for you? As a listener, as a fan, I listen, I hear Aaron Cliff music. I hear more of the great adventure that you're on. It's you, and there's a sound to it. It is that same sound that I've heard in the beginning. It's just more. This might be a little bit darker in theme, this record, but it still has a bright spark to it. And you're introducing different elements. That the horns are the first thing that stand out in this on this record and in the first single. How is it different for you? Is it different for you?
Yeah, it absolutely is. We could talk about some of the basic facts, like we have a new lineup of the band on this one, and I worked with some different auxiliary musicians. We did, as you mentioned, Bet on Zero is a collaboration with a seven-piece brass section, a Big Wise brass band. We did two other songs, Malaga and The Color of Flight, have a string quartet in them. Uh, I've incorporated other instruments in all the previous Aaron Clift Experiment albums, so that's not necessarily new. I would say the biggest change for me is the approach. I had written previous Aaron Clift Experiment albums with the intention that whatever I commit for my keyboard part has to be something I can play live. And so, I've got two hands, there's only so much I can do. So I felt like that was a very like kind of linear approach to writing, and it does have its strengths, for sure. But that's not normally how I hear music in my head when I'm coming up with ideas. I wanted to do more expansive arrangements because I got my start writing classical music. I got my start listening to and playing a lot of symphonic music. And so I always heard these sounds in my head, and I decided with when I started songwriting in late 2019 that I would not limit myself to worrying about am I going to be able to play this exact part live. I will just play what I hear in my head. I will find some sounds that interest me, and that'll be my starting point. That was how I jumped off with this. With Liar, that was one of the first songs I wrote for the album. It really started with two things. It started with that bass riff that you hear that Cliff Warren contributed. That was a warm up exercise that he'd been doing since the early '90s, and I heard him playing it one time at rehearsal and asked him what it was, and he said it was just a warm up he came up with. And I said, "You ever thought of turning that to a song?" And he said, "No." I said, "I'd be interested." So that the rhythmic intensity of that part saw kind of drove me to seek out something that could complement it with the keys. So I found this I called it a dancey arpeggiator. I don't remember the exact name of the patch, but I wanted to find new sounds with my keyboard part. I had just invested in the end of 2019 in a new MacBook Pro, and so I started getting upgrades to my system. I upgraded Ableton Live, which is my digital audio workstation, and then the plugins that I use are Native Instruments Complete, which is I use the stripped back version of it called Contact, which had like maybe 10 libraries or something with hundreds of sounds. Now I had hundreds of libraries with thousands of sounds. So I'm like a kid at the candy store, like, I gotta get all this stuff. I
Oh yeah.
spent I spent probably a month just going through it and trying out sounds and making notes like, okay, I like that, I like that, I like that. Some of them were inspired me so much that that became the basis for a song. Like when you listen to Malaga, there's a part in there where you hear these strings playing this triplet rhythm like da 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 da. That was a module that I got with Complete called Action Strings, and it has like these rhythmic patterns. And I remember playing that with some chords, and I thought it sounded really epic. And I think it was me. I misheard what rhythm it was. I thought it was in like 6/4 time, and it turned out to be 12/8. So I notated the song, and I had a drum beat that was in 6/4, and then I listened to it and I was like, wait a minute, I got a polyrhythm going on, and I was like, that's cool. All right, there's my song. There's my jumping off point.
Wow, that's great.
So I tried some different approaches with sound design, and I think with the mindset that I'm not going to worry so much about how am I going to play this live. I'm more concerned about just coming up with a sound palette that I like. I think with some of the other albums, the other piece of it that was different this time around is we spent more time making demos of the songs and higher quality ones. Like
Okay.
we used to rehearse all these songs when we were songwriting before. We would rehearse them and we'd get like a crappy recording on my phone, and that would be our demo. And so
Yeah.
we'd know how to play the songs, and that's great for live settings. But then when you actually get into the studio, whoever's producing the album is going to ask you a lot of questions like, hey,
Right.
what do you want to do here with this? What could we add to the lit to like, get a layer of sound? Because if you're just doing if you're just single tracking all your instruments, it's kind of boring, it's kind of dry.
Hmm.
So we used to make decisions on this kind of stuff when we were in the studio on the fly, and sometimes they involved like arranging decisions for the songs, and most of those I'm really happy with. But I can think of a couple instances where I listen back and I'm like, I could have done that a little bit better, or maybe I would have used a different reverb here or something. Like, the picky little details that go into making something sound great.
Right.
This time around, we were kind of forced to actually spend more time on this stuff because it was it was in February 2020. We had just auditioned Anthony Bassini, our guitarist, and we're
That's
like,
bad timing.
yeah, no, we had just gotten him in the band, and we're like, okay, so after South by Southwest Music Festival is over, we'll reconvene, and you'll have some time to rehearse these songs. We'll reconvene, we'll start doing some live shows, and we'll start writing the songs. Well, then South by Southwest Music Festival gets canceled in 2020, and
Yeah.
then the lockdown stuff started happening right after that. And like everybody else, we thought this is going to be a month. We'll get back together. April rolls around. They're like, actually, we need you to do this another month. Then it gets to May, and they're like, actually, we don't know when this is going to be over.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, oh man, we got to figure something out here. And luckily, the technology came to the rescue. I had started really diving deep into the core functionality of Ableton. I had used it for my keyboard sounds for live shows, but I hadn't really dug into how can I make backing tracks for live situations and how can I use the recording capabilities with Ableton. And I spent several months taking lessons online with an instructor who showed me these things, and that
Awesome.
technical leap forward for me allowed me to get my ideas out in a more coherent way. Besides just notating on on staff paper or in a notation program and making chord charts, I could actually I could play the keyboard. I know exactly how I voiced a chord. I know exactly how I played a part because I could see the piano roll notation in the MIDI and I could hear the audio back. It was a higher quality than doing it on the phone. And I could send these things to my bandmates. I could make drum loops. I can make bass parts and say, all right, here's kind of what I'm imagining for this song. Can you play a part that sounds like this?
Right.
And they'd go and record their parts. They'd send them to me. We'd assemble them into Ableton or into Cliff's program Reaper, which I've also used, and we'd add a little bit of production touches to it just to glue it together. And then we get together on a Zoom call and listen to this stuff. And in real time, we go back like, no, I think this section could use this right here or whatever. We do that. We did that for a good part of a year and a half until we got back together in August 2021. And then we started rehearsing. My initial fear was, oh man, is this stuff going to sound like it was stitched together or is it going to sound like a real band?
Right.
And actually, when we got together and started rehearsing this stuff, we were more prepared because we knew what parts we wanted to play. And then we worked out some of the kinks with the arrangements. And then by the time we get to the studio in April 2022, we could focus all our attention on let's get the best quality recording, let's get the best performance possible. And it was a lot less stressful in the studio this time because we had that preparedness. And I think that reflects in the final results.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine so. When you got a recording, a demo like that, you got all those little details are already defined. So you can just you all you got to do is tweak them, rather than create them on the fly. That's I can't believe you did that. A
We
lot of
recorded If All Goes Wrong in 2 weeks. I mean, like we
wow.
were we didn't have a permanent guitarist at the time, so we had different guitarists on different songs, and I was also getting married, and we recorded this in November 2017. I was getting married in March, so I didn't produce the album. I was really too distracted with just trying to manage all sorts of things. And then we were recording my keyboard parts in the studio. This time around, I had the luxury of recording at home because now I knew how to do that. I could take all the time I wanted to get the right performances. And actually, if you go back on my Instagram or Facebook, you'll see some videos from like 2021 where I'm like filming myself recording these parts.
Yeah.
And it's like uh, I challenged myself too because I said I was gonna play what I heard, and so like when you listen to the song "Rise," that keyboard part is a pain in the ass to play for me. I'm not like the greatest keyboardist in the world. I think of myself more as a singer and songwriter with who happens to use keyboard to compose, but this one really pushed me to kind of hone my chops a little bit more. And
Awesome.
I like doing stuff like that. I think every album we've done, there's at least one song that's like a real challenge for me on the keys, and then there's a song that's also a real challenge for me on vocals. And I for me, this album, I think the two vocal songs that were the biggest challenge were the title track and Rise because of all the vocal harmonies, and the title track just to get the right vibe and performance.
Yeah, it's and that's what I love. This is just an adventure. This album is a real adventure. Uh, the Liar you mentioned before touches me in a really great way. The the harmonies in that too. The formation of the song, the composition of the song is just, that cascading bass line is really wonderful when it first comes on. And Malaga, bright, shiny, feel good. That was just a great, was a really another highlight for me. So those, it's a motion album. It has a lot of motion to it. We go up, we go down, we go straight, we go forward, we go backwards, we go sideways, and it's great. And I appreciate that in music. I don't always get that. A lot of times I just get the push forward, which there's a mood for that, there's a time for that, and that I do like that. And sometimes we just float on top, but this has all of those things, and is really a great adventure on this record. The first single, Bet on Zero, I would say it's easily the most progressive in a traditional sense, uh, progressive piece of music. It's a running time of a little under 11 minutes. Uh, it's not the obvious choice for a single. Right?
Yeah.
We want it to be, it used to be under 3 minutes. Now, we're at the 5, 6 minute mark usually. This is just under 11 minutes. We have a long drum break there, and I want to ask you about the writing of a song like this. But first, I want to ask you about choosing this single, which is, I think it's a great choice. I love this song. Um, but it's not the obvious choice. How do you come to choose Bet on Zero as a single?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you again for your kind words. I'm glad you like the music so much.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
for it's kind of a counterintuitive thing because traditional wisdom says, yeah, got to keep it short and sweet. Here's the thing though, like with with the way the music industry is now, it's not like that anymore because there aren't the gatekeepers that they used to exist. I mean, they're still there. If you want to get on pop radio, you got to keep it short. But I'm not trying to get on pop radio. I'm trying to connect with an audience that appreciates this kind of marriage of classic and modern sounds, who likes stuff that's progressive, hopefully, and maybe some of the other influences that I have. So for me, I know the audience pretty well from going to concerts, from playing at Rossfest, from playing at festivals, and what people want to hear is so they want to hear at least one long song, but not just length, but also like can it tell kind of a longer form story in music.
Mhm.
And I always appreciated that aspect of progressive rock and a lot of other styles, is that storytelling capability, not
Definitely.
just through the words, but through the music. How can we paint this sort of cinematic picture? So for me, I always, every album I want to do at least one song that's like that. For this particular song, choosing it as a single is something we hadn't done before, but where where I really felt like this is the song that needs to be the single is I had done some training with Indepreneur. They're a music marketing, sort of educational music networking group that I've been a part of for the last 3 years. And one of my friends introduced me to them, and they are a great community. They have excellent teaching courses. I've learned so much about social media marketing and just music marketing and music stuff in general from them. They have a course that teaches about how to use a music video as a, they call it a fan finder. So what's a video that you can make to get people hooked on your music and discover you? And they talk about some of the qualities of what are good, songs to use for that. Everybody's genre is different, but I'm
Right.
like, what's the song that's the most attention grabbing from the get go? Okay, well, Bet on Zero starts with a blast of sound,
Yes, it does.
and I'm like, and it gets to the singing quickly, and it has a lot of twists and turns, and I'm like, this to me felt like, and it's got I think it's got a good hook with the chorus, and just like the qualities that I would want if I were a listener, like the kind of qualities that I would want from a song. And it has kind of I won't call it a gimmick, but it has an unusual, like it has a hook, something to hook you in, not just musically, like, a catchy chorus, but also like it's got a thing that it's doing with the brass band that's kind of different. So when I wrote the song, I kind of wrote it with that in mind, that this is going to be the song that is going to be my attention grabber, and
Okay.
that influenced the writing to a certain extent. But it also it gave me the initial direction to say, okay, like, I want to grab people's attention, but I felt like within that I could do a lot of different things. And for prog fans who like longer music and they want something that's catchy, I feel like this could do it. So
Well,
that was kind of my thinking of why I chose it.
I totally agree. And it grabbed me for sure. That blast of sound, that brass band, big wise brass band. Check it out. It's sensational. Um, Bet on Zero in towards the middle of the song, there's a drum break. Uh, we just get a really almost drum clinic. It's a beautiful thing. And there's different breaks throughout the song. We get a little bit of a solo, if you will, bass interlude, horn interlude. Everybody takes a little bit of a turn. Uh, when you're writing a song like that, is that all written in? Like when you initially write the song, do you write that drum break in there? You're not a drummer, not that I know of. So, do you make space for that and let somebody fill it in let the drummer fill it in with something? Or is this all charted and written out?
That's a great question. So the thing about progressive rock is, unlike a lot of styles of music, it's kind of, I'd call it non-standard. There, you can't say, well, play me a progressive rock song like you tell somebody, play me a 12 bar blues, right? I
Right.
mean, there's different flavors of 12 bar blues, but that there's a little bit more of a starting framework for that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But for me, I do chart everything. But this song came about with a bass riff that I had in my head. It's actually the bass riff you hear after the drum solo. That just came to me on a walk, and I kept humming this rhythm and this sound, and I went home, notated it on the keyboard, trying to figure out what time signature is that in, and discover it's something really wonky. And I thought it sounded cool, and I wanted to kind of explore more in that world. So I started writing different different bass riffs and putting them together, and then then I had the title of the song, and then I had the concept, and then I had the vocals on top of the bass part. So that was my skeleton for the song. And as I wrote it, it was originally probably like 5 minutes long. But then I thought, if I'm going to do something and I'm going to collaborate with this brass band, because that was the idea of our former drummer, Chase, who is also the percussionist in Big Wise Brass Band. And he suggested we work with them.
Okay.
So I had this idea of like we could do something that's sort of big band jazz fusion, like a little bluesy. So one of the things I know from listening to big band music and from listening to jazz is you give every musician a turn to solo in the song. So
Mhm.
there's a moment where the bass gets a bit of a break, right? And then there's a part where the guitar gets a solo. There's a part where the trombone player or the saxophone player, and then even the drummer. And that was something I enjoyed about listening to so many brass and big band composers. I listened to stuff by Duke Ellington and Charles Mingus were big influences for me on this one.
Uh,
So yeah, I did chart it out. I did write chord symbols and the measure numbers because it was necessary because almost every measure has a time signature change. But
Right.
and I did notate the bass part because I had written that out, and I had the MIDI and I could transfer it over to a written notation. So Cliff had both an audio and a visual thing to work off of. So that was kind of the framework that we hung everything around, and then I wrote the brass parts and but I didn't write out the solo. I didn't say, okay, play a paradiddle here, play a crash here. I just said
Right.
drum solo, and I said approximately 30 seconds. Well, that it was more like 2 minutes, but that was the part in the studio where we're like, okay, Pablo, our drummer Pablo, I want you to do a drum solo. And I said, as far as like style goes, this is a jazz fusion song, so try out a couple different things. And he had a couple ideas he wanted to try, so we did like 4 takes, and then we listened to each of the takes and we comped it a little bit just to kind of get the best pieces together. But those are all. Most of it was one take. There were just a few bits that were put in there, but yeah, that's really like the part of the improvisation is just let them do their thing.
Yeah.
um, I know kind of what the musicians are capable, so I give them a starting direction of like, hey, can you try something kind of like this? And I told like Will, who's the trombone soloist, I said, all right, this section is like you're drunk and you're staggering around. So it's like I said I wanted this. I wanted the music to tell the story of this compulsive gambler who's like in the casino. So like that section, he's kind of like drunk and stumbling around, and then like the saxophone solo kicks in and it's like a funky feel. I said, all right, this is the sleazy part. This is you in the casino gambling and wheeling and dealing. And then the guitar solo comes in and it's like manic. I said, and this is the part where you're running from the cops. So we had some visuals to go on with it too. And I said, all right, drum solo, the cops caught you.
Yeah, awesome. That's just cool. And you get all those feelings. It's a great song. It's and the horns just are, the blend of all of those band members, just wonderfully written.
Yeah.
Really, really great.
Thanks. And the thing is, like, you don't have to know any of that to listen to the song and get something out of it. I don't necessarily think there's one right way to hear it, but I think giving that direction to the players gives them something to work with, because I want the listener to connect to like the emotion of the music, and having that kind of paints a scene with a lot of different interesting colors.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does. And you do that a lot with your music. this record seems to deal in, I think about the past music, Locked, inspired, Walking Dead, right? Game of Thrones inspired some stuff, that kind of thing. This has a lot of social political issues. Pandemics seem to be at the forefront in some of this stuff. Um, a little bit of a different angle in lyrical theme. What inspired a lot of your lyrical themes here? And was there a specific message that you wanted to get to the listener as a whole?
I wrote this. I didn't start writing this album with a concept in mind. I just wanted to. The concept I had in mind was I want to try out some new sounds and just see what happens. And that's how I approach every album. But it started to take shape really with the title track, which I wrote in the summer of 2020. So by that point in time, you got the pandemic raging. You got I go on social media and there's misinformation everywhere.
Mhm.
I listen to the news and every day there's protests and political unrest going on that summer. It just seemed like everywhere around me there was just something making me upset. And I really felt like I needed to. I felt like I was living in an age of misinformation. And when I thought that to myself, I thought this is a great title for a song. So I started that song with a title in mind, and that keyboard part that you hear at the beginning that sounds really jagged and distressed because that's how I was feeling.
Hmm.
And so it was very therapeutic for me to write that song because I felt like there was a lot I wanted to say about just how I was feeling overwhelmed, being in this, being trapped in this age of misinformation and what it was doing to everything around me. And so after I had written that song, I felt very strongly that this could be a good subject for the whole album because I looked back at some of the other songs that I had written. I had already written Bet on Zero and Liar and Dark Secrets. And I'm like, what do these songs have in common? Oh, well, they're all talking about lies and deception in some way. And I thought this could be a good concept. So I wanted to have the first half of the album be kind of like you're thrown into this, right? You're seeing the social, political, and the personal consequences of lies and misinformation. And then the second half of the album is a little bit more optimistic and positive. It's like, okay, how do we get ourselves out of that hole? How can we find truth? How can we find peace of mind? And I tell that through the music in the album, and the artwork on the album also kind of it conveys this message. So I felt like I had found a concept that felt personal to me, but I also felt like if it's something that resonates with me, it's something that can resonate with the listeners as well. And you don't necessarily need to know what it's about, like the literal plot of things, but feeling that emotion and the message there, if it feels strong to me, I think it can convey a lot to the listener as well.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, for sure. Is there one medium in particular, more than any other that inspires you to write? Is it television? Does that really get your juices flowing? Or, when you watch the news and hear, the misinformation, the political things, or is it a book, nature, a nice walk? What inspires you the most, do you think?
There's a couple things besides music. Obviously, music inspires me. I'm a music nerd. I'm a musician at heart.
Mhm.
But outside of music, I can think of a couple things. I think stuff that is strongly visual or conveys emotion really strongly. So I think of like painting and photography inspire me a lot. Also, a lot of movies and TV shows, as you've mentioned a couple of them already. There have been a couple I've seen over the last few years that really motivated me. I think Bet on Zero probably got a little bit of influence from watching Better Call Saul.
Okay.
Uh, the black and white scenes in that certainly influenced my direction with the music video that we filmed in
Right.
black and white. Um, but also just this concept of being trapped in an addiction and not being able to stop and lying about it. I think that was an element that played itself out in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
Mhm.
Um, I felt like I could relate a little bit more to Better Call Saul, the character. Not that the Breaking Bad was by any means unrelatable, but there's something about the just how Jimmy McGill is this just seemingly ordinary guy. He's got a bit of a mischievous and he's got some problems, but not something you'd expect him to turn into a full blown criminal assisting, a meth empire.
Right.
I just thought the tragedy of that and how how these little lies and deceptions creep into his life, that inspires me a lot. That having a really strong character study and a visual language, to me, I always think about in every song I write, who who is speaking and who are they speaking to, and kind of what's the scene. So if I were filming this like a movie, what would it look like? And so there may not be a literal narrator, like it's not necessarily a literal story in every song.
Right.
It might be written in third person. It might be like very, vague lyrics, but I can still imagine a character or some sort of scene that's going on. So that's why painting and cinema and television really speak to me as a media for this kind of stuff.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, and it's great to have, a soundtrack, if you will, to a visual. You provide a visual through the music, for the listener, I think.
And see, that's another thing I like about progressive rock and so many of those adventurous bands is that they were thinking total package for their work.
Mhm.
It wasn't just making another album cover with a picture of the band. There were strong visual cues, and you can trace bands like King Crimson. You look at their 70s artwork, then you compare it to their 80s artwork and their 90s and 2000s stuff. You can see the evolution in their sound just from looking at their visuals.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that is a great point. That's a great point. You have a nice sized catalog now. Four records, a lot of material. Where do I direct somebody who wants to start listening to the Aaron Clift Experiment? Where's a good place to start?
If you want to hear what we're about right now, obviously start with the new album
Hmm?
and work your way backwards. Sometimes I tell people the easiest way to get into a band is maybe start with their current album and move backwards to see how they got there. Um, if you are maybe interested in seeing how we got started with this, then you could start with Lonely Hills and work your way forward. Um, I think I guess maybe the general direction I say is we've gotten maybe a little bit more electronic and a little bit heavier over the years, but that's not true with everything we do. The new
Yeah.
album has some stuff that's acoustic sounding and lighter. Color of Flight's a good example of that.
Mhm.
Weight of the World is a little bit lighter in tone, but yeah, I think that's a good place. If you go to our website, aaronclift.com, we have samples of all the albums. And of course, it is the only place to get Aaron Clift Experiment merchandise. So we have, for Bet on Zero, the artist who did all the artwork for our album, his name is Fumihito Sugawara. He did an absolutely incredible job with the single artwork for Bet on Zero. We took that into some posters, so you can get yourself a 12 by 18 poster featuring that artwork that he signed and numbered. So it's a limited
Wow.
edition. We have that. We have Bet on Zero playing cards. Uh, Used responsibly.
I
for your poker nights.
love it.
Uh, yeah, we have Bet on Zero playing cards, so it's got the single artwork on the back of them. We of course have the CD, so you can get the CD of the album, or if you prefer just digital download, we have those as well. If you're interested in getting like the complete package of our music, we have music. We have a bundle that you can get. It's cheaper than buying it on any other place. You get all the music in one place. Plus, we throw in some bonus live albums for you for free. So
Awesome.
yeah, that's what I tell people if they want to check it out.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, we'll put all the links at the bottom here in the description, and people can have a field day with all of this. It's a great adventure that you've brought us on. It really is. And it is for you musically as well. So you've progressed through your career, and we get to hear it all, and it's a great product for sure. Um, do you want to take this on the road? I'm sure you do. Is there something planned? Have you been looking at that? What's the story with touring?
Not at the moment, but it's I haven't ruled it out. It's just trying to get schedules aligned, finding the right time and place to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's a difficult thing. That's what a lot of fans don't realize. There's a lot goes into planning a tour.
Oh yeah, there's that, and I've been living with these songs for a while. I think this is the longest gap between albums for us. Not necessarily intended that way, but pandemic certainly delayed a lot of things. But uh, I certainly want to promote this album. Like I enjoy talking to you and doing interviews like this is I don't even consider this necessarily an interview. I consider it more like a conversation. But
Totally. Totally.
I like doing these kind of things, and other kind of events with fans to share the music. But um, probably after a couple months, I want to take a little bit of break, just to clear my head. I do have an interest in writing some more music after this. I have a couple ideas in mind of some things I'd like to try that I didn't do with this album, and certainly one thing this album did give me is now I have a couple more tools in my tool belt for like how I can go about writing music. So I think there I think there are certain types of instrumentation that I haven't worked with as much before that it interests me,
Nice.
and certain types of there's certain genres and just certain things I'd like to try that I haven't done yet. So I'm keeping an open mind. I always approach um, every new album with just like, well, let's see what I feel inspired by. I think the thing that's changed for me in the last few years is I continue to listen to the classic stuff that I grew up with, but I'm discovering more and more new music as well, and a lot of different genres. So I've been listening to the last few years. I've been listening to Leprous a lot. I don't know if you've ever gotten into them. They're
Oh,
amazing.
yeah.
I saw them live last year. That was an amazing show, one of the best I've seen in years.
Nice.
Those guys, I've been getting into what else? Oceans of Slumber has been a huge one for me. They're a
Okay.
progressive metal band from Houston. Um, I've been listening a lot to stuff that's totally not my normal wheelhouse. I started
Right.
listening to The Weeknd a lot in the last few
Okay.
years, and I really love Dawn FM was one of my favorite albums from last year.
Excellent.
It's to me what I like about his music is he does have references to a lot of 80s and classic sort of pop music that I grew up listening to.
Hmm.
Of course, Michael Jackson and Prince. I grew up loving that stuff, but he takes it in a new direction, and it doesn't sound just like a rehash. And I think that's something that I enjoy doing with my own music is how can I take some of the music influences that I grew up with, but also try and find a new spin on that and a new direction for it. So, oh,
Yeah.
I'm always interested in finding music that can do that and have that be kind of fuel for my next writing sessions.
Yeah, and that's great to hear, man. I mean, that's really great to hear. You're always active, thinking about your music and ways to progress, which is good news for the fan for sure. Looking forward to what you do in the future, my friend.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I want to respect your time. This has been great, man. It's been really great. Long overdue, for sure. Yeah, let's do it again. If you ever have anything you're putting out, let me know. We'll get you on. We'll get the word out for sure.
Sounds great.
All right, Aaron, take care. I
You
will
as
talk to
well.
you soon. All right. Bye bye.